Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
It is Bloomberg Business Week on this Tuesday, December 1st. Carol Masser with Tim Stenovic. And we're going to get back to the CEO of Atlantic Health System, really kind of giving us a little bit of a gut check of where we are with the virus.
And a bit of optimism.
Yes, because I do feel like I keep saying this over and over, we've got a little bit of a playbook on how to deal with this. All right, we'll get back to Brian Granulotti in just a moment. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there. A lot going on today. Let me begin with news out of Washington, repeating our earlier headline. Attorney General William Barr says the Justice Department has not uncovered evidence of widespread voter fraud that would change the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Barr's comments coming in an interview with the Associated Press. Investors dumping treasuries amid a glimmer of hope that Congress will reach an economic stimulus compromise, driving yields up across the curve. 10-year yield now 0.92%. Stocks starting December on a bullish note with a rebound from yesterday's retreat. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ close to session highs right now. The S&P is up 51, higher by 1.4%. The Dow's up 262 points, up 0.9%. NASDAQ is up 185 points, up right now by just about 1.5%. Gold is surging 2.1%, $18.14 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.7%. $44.54 a barrel. Pfizer and partner BioNTech are seeking regulatory clearance for their COVID-19 vaccine in the European Union, putting the shot on track for potential approval there before the end of the year. Pfizer shares, they're up today by 2.8%, but shares of BioNTech out of Germany lower now by 8.8%. Dr. Amish Adalja is senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and on Bloomberg Television this morning, he was asked about the biggest challenge after vaccines do get approved.
To me, I think it has to be logistics, because we know already, looking at the phase 3 data, that everything does appear to be good in terms of safety, in terms of efficacy, a much higher efficacy than we ever expected with these first-generation vaccines. So now the question is really just getting the approval, which most people think is going to be forthcoming in a matter of weeks, and then the scale-up of production, and then getting this vaccine into the arms of people all around the world, turning it into a vaccination. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest public health challenges we've ever faced.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. United Healthcare Group expects the pandemic to carve $2 billion out of its profits next year, with COVID-19 testing and treatment costs remaining steady, even as more Americans return to their doctors' offices for routine care. The company unveiled that outlook for the year ahead in its annual Investor Day presentation. Shares of United Healthcare, ticker UNH, up now by 1.9%. Recapping equities advance 10-year 0.92%, S&P up 51 at a record of 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, appreciate that update. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get back to the CEO of Atlantic Health System, Brian Granulotti. He is still with us on the phone from Morristown, New Jersey. Hey, so Brian, one thing, and before we move on.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I decided to put stop on profit for Swissy. As you can see, we still hold position on, let me at point 90.27. Yep, let me put it to right level. Okay, was short position. Okay. Right, so all I have to do, I will need to find where is this position. Okay, it's right here. So I will put my stop on profit for 0.9007. Will be nice profit. Right. Actually, no, I will put up to 17 first. We will see how it's going to be. Okay, I put stop on profit for Swissy to 0.9017.
Their life has been, turned upside down, and it's devastating. They couldn't walk. So it is, Tim's, definitely something that has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and it's something that just affects everybody differently.
Exactly.
If you get it, you don't know how it's going to affect you, and that's something we all need to keep in mind. Brian, I want to talk about the vaccine and how you're planning on rolling it out and distributing it once it becomes widely available. How do you do that at Atlantic Health System?
So we've had planning underway for the last several months to make sure that as soon as we are able to, we will get this vaccine in people's arms. Because the development of the vaccine has been nothing short of remarkable, because what the government's been able to do is to hedge companies' financial bets on this vaccine and allow them to follow the science and get it done safely, but at the same time begin production on these. So we're going to start to see, assuming this moves forward like we expect this week and over the next couple of weeks, vaccines being sent to each of the states and then being delivered to sites like our Atlantic Health hospitals. And then we have plans to get those into the arms of people. And that's going to be the real challenge. We're going to have to set priorities at the beginning, and so we're looking forward to the guidance that we're going to get from the government this week. States have put together plans, but generally it seems like it's going to be healthcare workers first, and we think that that's really important. And then working on people who have other vulnerabilities and people who are older, because the goal here is to obviously get as much vaccine out into the general public by probably the middle of the year, and that's going to be important. But the key thing is people having confidence in taking it.
Yeah, no, I know. I think the CDC, right, I think they're voting actually today on who will be first in line for a vaccine, so we will be looking out for that headline. Hey, Brian, thank you so much. I know your world is crazy, and you're so kind to always find some time for us, so stay safe, and we wish you well, and I'm sure we'll be checking in again with you over the next couple of months. Brian Granulotti, Chief Executive Officer, Atlantic Health System, on the phone from Morristown, New Jersey. But it is about logistics and getting it out now, right? Like you got to have a plan. You got to think about it. It's got to be kept cool. You got to make sure if somebody gets one dose, they're going to get the second dose, right? To make sure it is effective.
It's incredibly complex, and I'm eager to see how we pull it off.
Yeah, I am fingers crossed, and hopefully it all goes well. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic, and let's get another check on world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons, 99.1 Newsroom in the nation's capital. Hey, Nance.
Hey, thanks, Carol. President-elect Joe Biden is looking at an ambitious recovery plan once in office. Today, he introduced those who would lead the economic fight, including Janet Yellen as Treasury Secretary.
We will find collective purpose to control the pandemic and build our economy back better than before, to rebuild our infrastructure and create better jobs, to invest in our workforce, to advance racial equity and make sure the economic recovery includes everyone.
Economists warned that
I will move my stop on profit to 0.9012. Okay. Let's see. This is nice stop on profit level that it gives us £100.
plan that offers additional unemployment relief and money for state and local governments. A panel of U.S. advisors is meeting this afternoon to vote on how initial supplies of a COVID-19 vaccine will be given out once one has been approved. Former CDC Director Dr. Thomas Frieden says the panel will be asking several questions.
One is, how much good are you going to do? How many lives are you going to save? Second is, what's fair? What's the fair way to do it? And the third is, How can we do this openly, transparently, so that there's no backroom deals?
He says it's likely frontline health workers would be given priority. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic of Bloomberg's Quick Take. You can catch him at 9 and at noon. He's a busy guy. Bars. When do you think is the next time you'll go to a bar? Have you been to a bar?
I have not been to a bar. I did over the summer do some outdoor drinking at a brewery a couple times.
Okay, so
but
some social
we did not
distancing.
step foot inside anything.
So it might be a while. Next
It's going to be a
summer,
while,
maybe
yeah.
next fall.
Until there's a vaccine, Carol, I think.
Well, it's interesting because you do wonder, this industry, right? We know restaurants have been hit hard, bars have been hit hard. There's a story on the Bloomberg terminal. They did actually talk to the Molson Coors Beverage co-CEO, or CEO, excuse me, Gavin Hattersley, and he says drinking at bars might never recover post-COVID. I don't believe that. Is that
I
like
don't either.
cities are
Okay,
going
I'm so
cities
glad
are going to
you say
go
that.
away? I mean,
I'm so glad you say that because I pretty much replied
crazy.
when our executive producer sent us this story, and I said, "Give me a break. Drinking will come back."
it will. I think people get it. This is not where you can be right now, and that's why all the bars have been shut down or limited. But I think we're social beings. I think ultimately these businesses will come back. I think people will come back to the cities. I just think some of these trends will not.
Look, Zoom happy hours are not going to replace drinking in bars.
Have you done a Zoom happy hour?
I haven't done a Zoom happy hour, but Carol, this weekend we're doing a Zoom family wine tasting with my family all over.
Wow.
I'm really excited about it.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's taken a long time to
That's
set
actually a great
up.
idea.
It's going to be fun.
So you send bottles to everybody?
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
So-
We're pulling it off.
All right, stay
California,
tuned, 'cause I
Colorado,
want-
Washington. It's
That's
happening.
actually clever. That's a really sweet idea. Well, we've done actually wine on this show where we've figured out how to, and we've talked to vineyards and so on and so forth, and stay tuned. You'll get involved with that. But anyway.
Sooner the better.
But what's interesting is they talk about Molson specifically, like a lot of the alcohol industry, they've actually done really well, and people have found some comfort in familiar brands while working at home, living at home.
And if they're not buying them at the bars, then they're buying them at retail locations. The company is saying that those brands like Coors Light and Coors are growing
Yeah.
significantly.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting.
Miller Lite, I should say.
I think bars will be back, no
Yeah, I
doubt
think
about
so
it.
too.
See, Tim and I we agree about that.
I'm not
All right.
concerned.
You're listening to Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Risk on. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallying. S&P, NASDAQ at records. S&P 500 index up now by 54 points. That is a gain of 1.5%. Again, at or near session highs. We've got the Dow up 305 now, up 1%, while NASDAQ is up 192 points, up 1.6%. 10-year at 0.93% right now, down 28.30 seconds on the 10-year. Gold surging 2.2%, up 38.59 the ounce at 18.15. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.6%, 44.62 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser along with Tim Stanovic. And we know running a political campaign, it's about fundraising, it's about getting voters, it's about building infrastructure and support. It's also about building out campaign technology, which we know is critical for Donald Trump and the Republicans back in 2016 and for the Democrats this past November. So let's get into a great story in the magazine. It's about the digital machine that Democrats need to keep winning. Bloomberg Business Week national correspondent Josh Green, is joining us. He's on the phone in D.C., along with Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber on the Access Line in Brooklyn. Joel, this is an interesting story. I mean, technology, we saw the Republicans use it. Now it seems like Democrats have figured it out.
Yeah, and who better than to write about the story than our great M&A reporter Josh Green, who also
headed to the
is
title.
National correspondent. Yeah, exactly. He's multifaceted, that Josh Green.
He is.
But that was sort of the root of it, because he had done a story for the magazine in 2017 about Mobilize America. But the biggest theme here is not only that marriage that I'm sure he's going to talk about in a second, but there's a line in the story yesterday's story where he throws back to the Obama moment back when Obama was reelected, and sort of the tech prowess that was bestowed upon Democrats then. But there was one thing that was missing, which is it didn't have any lasting ability. And what Josh has found here is that we're beginning to see a marriage here that may be able to become something of a machine. How about that, Josh? Can I just take every word out of your reporting?
We're done now.
Say it for myself. But over to you for more M&A.
I like the idea that I think this might be the first M&A I've ever reported on. Let's put it this way: the reason that I was prompted to report on an M&A for the first time in my 10+ year Bloomberg career was that, as you said, I wrote about one of these companies back in 2017 because they were a startup by a couple of young millennials who were sort of appalled that Donald Trump had gotten elected and the Democrats couldn't beat him. And so they wanted to develop new political technology to reach the kind of voters that Hillary Clinton couldn't reach and hadn't turned out. So they called me up actually a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, we built our company into 100+ people. We're now going to merge with a big Democratic tech company called Every Action. They were being acquired. But to me, the evolution of this company and its acquisition was really emblematic of something I think was really important in this last election and hasn't gotten enough attention because Democrats, frankly, spent the month since Trump was defeated kind of bickering and shooting at each other, which I think has taken away from what I talk about in the lead of this piece was that the Democrats' organizing and fundraising prowess, driven by this kind of political technology, has produced more than 80 million votes for Joe Biden. And any hope that Democrats have of broadening their governing coalition and winning races in the midterms and that sort of thing is going to depend on this machine that was built. And the fact that these two political technology companies are coming together and joining means that Democrats' organizing and tech abilities are going to grow even larger. Now, as Joel alluded to, Democrats were plagued for years and years and years. Even when Obama was winning, they were plagued by a fundamental structural shortcoming in the way that they did politics. And that was that every time you had a big presidential campaign like Obama come along, he actually had to build his own technology internally. They had to kind of start from scratch. It's like getting a job at Bloomberg, but in order to get there, I have to build my own car to sort of drive there. I mean, it's one of these problems where when you step back and look at it from somebody outside politics, it seems sort of absurd that nobody thought to fix this earlier, but this was a big problem. Obama built a big tech operation. As soon as his campaign ended, it all dissolved and went away, and Hillary had to start from scratch. So what these companies done is basically take the technology building from outside campaigns that can grow and exist and innovate, beyond a single campaign cycle. And I think the fact that Democrats turned out 80 million votes, even while they didn't achieve all they wanted to, shows how powerful this was and how powerful it can be moving forward.
So, Josh, I mean, you described this as a Salesforce-like platform for liberal campaigns and causes, and the company Mobilize. When these two companies together, I mean, what is the actual technology that they have? What are they able to do now?
Well, they do a lot of things. I mean, what was interesting about Mobilize, which I first wrote about, was they looked at Hillary's loss and they saw, all right, she performed really badly among millennials and really badly among black voters compared to Obama. Why? And what they figured out was that the traditional ways of organizing, you get a list on a piece of paper, you go out and you knock on doors, didn't really reach those populations, either because, they're transient like millennials or they move around a lot. And so they thought that, well, look, the one way to reach everybody has a cell phone now, whether you're young, old, black, white. They built the technology through an app, and this is something that scaled, and they tested it out in 2017. I wrote a big feature for Business Week about how they were doing it in the Virginia off-year elections. It worked wonderfully, and the party, to its credit, recognized this and spread it all across the country in the midterm election, in the midterm races, which Democrats won handily. I think 20 of the something like 26 Democratic presidential candidates from this past cycle used the technology. So what it really is, one of the founders described it to me as an engagement funnel. You have all these sort of hyper excited, new to politics activists who people were out in the Women's March, doing March for Our Lives, not necessarily things that were campaign related, but suddenly they're inspired and they want to get involved. These apps and this technology helps funnel that initiative, that eagerness to participate, and connects them with a local campaign that can actually use their help. That's really what we saw with Joe Biden's campaign. The fact that Biden really was kind of in his basement. He wasn't out there campaigning, and yet through this use of technology and being able to kind of connect people, they managed to turn out 80 million votes and help Biden to defeat Trump. I think that's a critical piece of technological evolution that's going to be important going forward for both parties, but especially for Democrats.
So, Josh, let's spin this forward. We've got, Georgia Senate race here on the horizon. After that, we're going to have some midterms. Like, when are we going to see sort of the fruits of this marriage, and how are we going to be evaluating them?
I just got about a minute, Josh.
Well, I think we're already seeing. I mean, there are people on the ground. There's lots of volunteers. I was talking to one of the Mobilize founders who said that the engagement, the volunteer engagement around the Georgia Senate races is even higher than it was in the midterm elections in 2018. On the other hand, Republicans have their biggest engagement driver, and that's Donald Trump. And it sounds like he's going to be heading down there in the next week. Both sides, this won't come as news to anybody, but both sides are just trying to turn out every single vote they can because it looks like this is going to be a very close pair of elections. I think if Democrats are able to rekindle the outpouring that Joe Biden received, they're going to be in pretty good shape. We just don't know yet whether Democrats can win or excite people with Trump not on the top of the ticket. But we're going to find out on January 5th.
All right. Well, good stuff as always, Josh. Thank you so much. Who knew? Political M&A reporter, also Bloomberg Business Week national correspondent.
He can do it all.
He can do it all. Josh Green. Anything you want to ever know about politics and the campaign trail, man, you've just got to read Josh's stuff. Of course, author of the book that explains the 2016 election outcome. We're talking about Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Nationalist Uprising. Josh, of course, on the phone from D.C., and Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber on the access line in Brooklyn. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to come right back. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. We're going to talk politics. We're going to talk about that Biden economic team.
It's something.
It is something.
A lot of firsts.
Which I love. A lot of women, a lot of diversity.
And they just finished speaking about an hour ago.
So we're going to break it down in just a moment right here on Bloomberg.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. Final hour of trading on this Tuesday, December 1st, first trading day of the new month. Stocks beginning December on a bullish note, a rebound from yesterday's retreat. The dollar extending its slide to a more than two-year low. Treasury yields are jumping. Look at the 10-year with a yield now of 0.93%. Risk-on mood is powering the S&P and NASDAQ to records. Traders continue to bet vaccine news will lead to an economic surge next year. S&P 500 index up 48 points, up 1.3%, again at a record. The Dow is up 265 points, up 0.9%. NASDAQ advancing 168 points to a record 12,367. That is a gain now of 1.4%. Again, the 10-year worth repeating, the yield there 0.93%. Gold up 2.1%, higher by $36 the ounce at $18.13. West Texas Intermediate crude slumping 1.6%, $44.60 a barrel. The OECD has cut its 2021 global growth forecast to 4.2% from 5% as the resurgence of the coronavirus dramatically weakens the global recovery. The Paris-based organization also warns the situation could deteriorate if governments withdraw support too soon or fail to deliver effective vaccines. Dr. Laurence Boone is chief economist at OECD.
What I'm concerned about is, in some instances, there's a lack of connection between the size of the fiscal stimulus and the effect on the economy. And that's where fiscal public spending are not spent wisely, which is why we're insisting on the need to target the appropriate people, the viable firms. Some countries do that very well as all those that are left behind.
BlackBerry surging the most ever after the wireless company signed a multi-year agreement with Amazon Web Services to develop and market its intelligent vehicle data platform called Ivy. BlackBerry shares up now by 25%. They are off session highs. And Tesla is gaining after S&P Dow Jones Indices says it will be added to the S&P 500 index in one shot on December 21st. Tesla up 2.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
For Secretary of Treasury, I am really pleased to be able to nominate Janet Yellen. No one is better prepared to deal with these crises. I wish it weren't as much of a crisis, future Secretary.
And of course, that was President-elect Joe Biden just earlier today nominating Janet Yellen, former Fed chief, to be the next Treasury Secretary. And I really do think this Biden economic team, Tim, is really one of our top stories of the day, and certainly at this hour.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of firsts. Not only does it include Yellen, of course, but Neera Tanden as well. And if she would be confirmed, she would have a lot of firsts to go along with her as well. And it's, I think, exciting to see for a lot of people because President-elect Biden has said he wants his cabinet to look like America. And it seems like he's making good on that promise.
Yeah, really. When he was announcing all the people, very, very diverse. Let's get some thoughts from our Bloomberg News politics editor, Wendy Benjaminson. She is back with us on the phone from Washington. So, Wendy, I mean, it really does look like, in general, and certainly with this economic team, that Joe Biden is thinking about diversity and thinking about what America looks like and what his team needs to look like.
Yes, absolutely, Carol. I mean, he is making a point about them being diverse. He is certainly showing them to be diverse, and there are many, many firsts. As you said, Janet Yellen would be the first female Treasury Secretary. Cecilia Rouse would be the first African American to head the Council of Economic Advisors. Neera Tanden is an Indian American who would lead the Office of Management and Budget, although women have led that office before. So he really is working on that. Now, there are some. Representative Jim Clyburn from South Carolina, who feels that there aren't enough African Americans being selected yet, but there's still a lot of names to go, and we'll see where that leads.
Wendy, I want to hit on Neera Tanden for a second, because it does seem like if there is one person here who is seeming to get a lot of flack from both the right and the left, it's her. And I'm wondering what the chances are of her being thrown in there, because the Biden team needs someone not to be confirmed, someone to be rejected by Republicans.
Well, you know politics, Wendy. You know how this works.
Right. Well, if you ask the Biden team, of course, they are 1,000% behind her, and they, did not want to shirk from nominating someone they believe to be highly qualified, even though she has irritated Republicans to no end. And the second highest ranking senator, John Thune, today said, pretty much it's not going to happen. And the Lindsey Graham, who chairs the Budget Committee, which would have to first confirm the director of the Office of Management and Budget, said it's going to be a real uphill climb for her. But their reasoning is not that she's not qualified. It's not anything else. It's that she has tweeted insulting things at Republican senators. And I think anyone who's been on Earth for the last 4 years.
Yeah, who else is
would know
tweeting?
I was just gonna say,
Who does that remind you of,
Republican
tweeting insulting
president
things?
does that a bit, yeah.
Yeah. Two wrongs don't make a right. I'm just going to say it, kids.
That is right, Carol. We're parents.
Exactly.
So I do wonder, though, is there somebody on this list who you think faces better chances or worse chances of getting past Republicans if Mitch McConnell and Republicans hold on to the Senate?
Right. Well, I do think Janet Yellen will have almost no problem getting confirmed. She was confirmed to be Fed chair by a Republican Senate, and senators really don't like to admit they're ever wrong. So if they confirmed her once, they'll confirm her again.
Great point.
She's well respected. Her politics may not agree with their politics, but there's no question she's respected. She's top notch. I just don't see that one happening. Neera Tanden may be the one that gets tossed back. She is the only one so far that everybody has said, hold the phone, this may not work. So that's going to be the fight to see if Biden decides it's really, really worth it to have that fight. And he may.
I just want to mention, a couple of headlines that have crossed the Bloomberg terminal. Bill Barr, saying that the Department of Justice hasn't uncovered widespread voting fraud. I just find it fascinating that these kind of headlines are still crossing. And then we've got, the president-elect putting together his team. I mean, it's just, how do you continue to make sense, Wendy, out of these kind of two Washingtons right now?
Exactly. Well, I think it's 90% one Washington and 10% another Washington. I think really there's one person in town who believes that Donald Trump won the election. That's Donald Trump. His own attorney general, as you said today, said he's seen no evidence of election fraud to an extent that would change the results of the election. Bill Barr did just leave the White House. We're waiting to find out if he left with his job or he left, to carry a cardboard box out of the Justice Department. We don't know yet. We don't know. But Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, came back and said, well, Barr doesn't know what he's talking about. We have tons of evidence and he won't look at it and that sort of thing. So, no, everyone, even these senators I was just talking about, are talking about confirming Biden's picks, even though they will not call him the president-elect or acknowledge that he won the election. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and Wendy, we are seeing another headline cross the Bloomberg from the Associated Press that says that Barr has appointed Durham's special counsel to keep investigating the Russia probe origins under the new administration. What are the implications of this for President-elect Biden when he becomes President Biden in January?
Well, this is a big decision President-elect Biden will have to make and his administration, and we should watch very carefully who he chooses as Attorney General as a signal to where that decision will go. Does he want to spend the next 4 years relitigating the Russia probe, the Trump, and everything that Democrats feel the Trump administration did wrong, and investigate your political opponents, which is always sort of anathema in American politics, or it used to be, or does he want to, as he said throughout the campaign, heal the country, unify the country, and move forward, focusing on the economic recovery and getting us all past the pandemic? So I think, there was talk that someone like Preet Bharara, who used to be the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, might be the Attorney General, not so much anymore, which does signal that maybe he doesn't want to, spend the next 4 years investigating Donald Trump.
It's fascinating. My understanding, just reading the AP write-through, I guess Barr is saying that Durham's investigation narrowing to focus more on the conduct of FBI agents who had worked on that Russia investigation. So it is kind of fascinating to see that could continue, into the next administration. Wendy, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Wendy Benjaminson, she's politics editor at Bloomberg News, joining us on the phone from Washington, D.C. That will be fascinating if it carries over right to a Biden administration.
Yeah, and he'll have serious choices to make about whether he wants to end it or keep it going, because there are implications for both.
Yeah, exactly. And I do get the feeling he wants to move forward, so we shall see. All right, let's get back to world and national news headlines. Following it all for us, Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol, you've been talking about it. President-elect Joe Biden has formally introduced his nominees and appointees to key economic posts. Biden has tapped, among others, Janet Yellen to be Treasury Secretary, and if confirmed, she would be the first woman to lead the Treasury Department. Biden says his team is comprised of experienced officials, including those who helped during the 2008 financial crisis. He says their expertise will be especially needed now.
From the most unequal economic and job crisis in modern history, we can build a new American economy that works for all Americans, not just some, all.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin have been giving their take on the economy in a periodic appearance before the Senate Banking Committee.
Powell said the economy is proving more resilient than expected, but 10 million Americans are still out of work, and widespread vaccinations are still months away.
There are a lot of small businesses that are at risk of going out of business during this winter, which could be a tough few months. The risk of people at the lower end of the income spectrum, these are not people with a lot of savings, a lot of resources, or a lot of opportunities right now. There are parts of the economy that really might need help to get that last span of the bridge in place.
Mnuchin added that small businesses, notably restaurants, need not loans but cash grants. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Attorney General Bill Barr is weighing in on the election and says the Justice Department has found no signs of voting fraud on the scale needed to change the outcome. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic of Bloomberg's Quick Take. And Dow Jones has a story. I mean, I feel like there's a story like this every day, every week. A new setback for big cities as return to the office fades. You and I were just talking, though, earlier about, bars are going to come back. Big cities. New York City will come back.
Look, I'm talking my book here, of course, because I live in New York City, and I love New York City. But New York City is going to come back. Carol, I don't think the working from home thing is for everybody. I don't think it's going to stick around. And you saw a lot of suburbs, the demand for houses in the suburbs go up significantly over the summer.
Right.
But what is that? What are they betting on? Right? They're betting on, if you think you're going to be working remotely, you're not going to live in the suburbs. You're going to move very far away where you can get an even bigger house, right?
That's right.
So these people are saying, in a sense, okay, well, we were thinking about moving to the suburbs for in a few years. That accelerated, like everything.
Right, like let's just do it now.
Let's do it now. And we're probably going to be commuting to the city at some point.
What I want to watch in particular is what happens in Silicon Valley. Like, because you have seen companies who say, yep, you want to work from home from now on, right? But they've also said that we're going to reduce your salaries if you're going to be working from home, because you could essentially work, in the middle of the country, but be working for Microsoft. And so that to me could be a very significant shift. But I think ultimately, the reason, I work in the city because I love the city and I love to come to the city. I have a 17-year-old who, has gone to school in the city. She's going to go somewhere else for college, but she says, I want to come and live and work in the city. So I don't think cities are going to go away.
And I also think people are really starting to miss their colleagues. My wife went and got coffee with one of her colleagues yesterday, and she ended up staying with her for hours because, Microsoft Teams and Zoom is not the same.
It isn't the same. I was thinking about that because we're doing so many virtual conferences that way, and it's great because the accessibility, everybody's available, right? Everybody's home. But I do miss, I said to somebody after doing an event, I miss being kind of next to you in front of a crowd, just having a conversation. It's a different feel. It just is.
And for me, working from home is hard.
Yeah. So, all right, go ahead. Keep churning out these stories. There might be some more hybrid working, but I don't believe big cities, the end of it. I don't think the end of office work as we know it.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business
From
Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleton. Up Tuesday, first trading day of the new month. We are seeing a late day fade, but still we've got the S&P and NASDAQ at records. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks in the green, although, like you said, well off their morning highs. Dow's currently up 195 points, was up 444. S&Ps are up 40. NASDAQ is still up 147. The U.S. 10 yield at 0.92% now. Gold trading higher by 38, and transports gained 93 points. Among the main 11 SB sectors, all were in the green, led by gains in telecom, financials, and the industrials. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Apple, Intel, and Travelers, Salesforce, and 3M led to the downside. After earnings, Zoom Video fell 15%. And in other news, Reuters report that Elon Musk said he'd discuss it if a rival car maker offered to merge. And wrapping things up, Salesforce reports after the bell. CNBC reported a deal for Slack could come then. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie.
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over at your Bloomberg Time Squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. Thanks so much, Charlie Pellet. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser, along with Tim Stenovic of Bloomberg Quick Take. And we're going to talk a little small business right now. We like to do this once a week. Bloomberg Business Week Small Business Survival Guide. And there's a story about a Brooklyn-born lifestyle brand that has been expanding in real life. They actually came in just as the pandemic was like getting underway. So it's amazing, right, that they were able to get started.
Yeah, talk about bad luck.
Talk about timing, right? Yeah. But they seem to be doing it. So let's talk about it. Let's bring in Bloomberg News editor Dimitra Kesanidis. She's on the phone in New York City, along with Jill Lindsay, owner of the business and shop that bears her own name. She's on the phone in Brooklyn. So, Dimitra, you always bring us these interesting small businesses. How did this come to your attention?
Hi. Well, again, we have our amazing small business reporter, Nick Leiber. And Jill Lindsay's shop in Brooklyn is not far from where Nick is. And he'd heard about it through a couple of people, possibly even one of our own editors who have noticed the store, noticed the people going in, have been part of that community. Her store is very much about community and building a community. And then we heard that she got this space at Rockefeller Center because Rock Center is starting slowly on this effort to bring more local community-based businesses into the complex there.
All right, so let's talk about it. So Jill, come on in. I mean, tell us about creating this business in the middle of a pandemic.
Well, hi, you guys. It's such a pleasure to be here. It has truly been such a wild ride to open another store after, there was a moment when I wasn't even sure that the Brooklyn store was going to make it after we were closed for 5 months. So it's been truly a gift, and Rockefeller Center has been incredibly supportive, and I am so excited for their reimagination of this space and bringing in local businesses to help. So it's, we're there, and we're so excited to be there, and we don't ever want to leave.
So, Jill, take us into what it was like for you in the spring when the pandemic hit, when you had to close the store. How did you recover from that?
Yeah, so we closed in March, and it was about mid-June, and I'd applied for all the loans, and we only got a little bit from the PPP because I'm a really small business, and we only had a really small staff. So the number, that we got for the loan was pretty small. And then I applied for the EIDL loan, and I got that. And it was truly one of those moments where I was like, I believe in the community. I believe in the small businesses that we sell and support. And I feel like it's my mission to try to stay open. So I'm going to take this loan and try to go for it.
And forgive me, because you have been in business for 2014, and the Rock space was all about additional space, but it is pretty remarkable that you've been doing it. What have you kind of learned during this process?
100%. I have learned that community can overcome anything, and we're so blessed to have such an amazing community. And, like during the pandemic, we had 2 of our customers create a GoFundMe for the store. And I really believe that creating community and supporting local artisans and a local economy is what we need to do. And so that's what, we'll continue to do with hopefully more locations that we're able to open. And I think especially for Rockefeller Center, bringing local New York City makers to a place where we're surrounded by J. Crew and Anthropology is going to be a really big thing.
Yeah, that's very compelling, the local piece of it, Jill, just looking for people who are making things. That really does contribute to the community feel. There was a story that Nick talked to you about a little bit, and I thought you'd share it with us about the incense maker who was selling on a card table on the street in Bed-Stuy. Can you tell us about that?
Of course. It's one of our top-selling brands. It's called Encausa. They do incense and ceramics, and they work with artisans out of Peru. And, when I first found out about them, they were selling literally on the street, and it was on Bedford Avenue. And so I reached out to them, and I was like, I love your incense and your, what you're doing. And through the almost 7 years that I've been in business, it's been amazing to watch them grow because we were one of the first stores that they sold to. And, there came a point where Nordstrom had reached out to them, and that was one of my first design jobs in my previous career. And so they reached out and they were like, Jill, what should we do? Like, how do we do this? And then Whole Foods reached out to them and they're like, Jill, how do we, so it was like, what I love most about what I do is being able to support brands and their growth as well. So it's rewarding on so many fronts.
And Jill, I wonder about what your store is going to look like on the other side of the pandemic. What changes that you've made now are going to become permanent? What does it look like in July when hopefully we're at the other side of this?
And just got about 30 seconds here.
Sure. So a big part of the store that we haven't gotten back is our wellness services because I'm not in a way to bring that back to people yet. So, which was the biggest part of the store, which is caring for the people around us. So I'm excited for that part to come back and for our food and beverage part to come back full force and continue to grow and help support brands.
I got to say, it's great to hear a small business owner who's actually figuring it out and able to expand, keep the business going, and actually support others. So great story. Jill Lindsay, thank you so much. And Demetra is sending me a note. She's making history as the first indie woman-owned, retail outlet at Rock Center. Rock Center is so traditional, right?
Yeah, and it's just so nice to hear a story like this when we're just hearing so many stories about stores closing.
Yeah, figuring it out, right? Exactly. Demetra Cassanides, editor at Bloomberg News, on the phone from New York, and Jill Lindsay joining us on the phone from Brooklyn. Check out more at Bloomberg.com. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic. And coming up, we've got the chart of the day. And you know what that means.
It means we have to guess a song that I'm not going to
I think
guess
you're
correctly.
actually better than you think.
All right, well, I'm 0 for 1 now.
0 for
Yesterday
1.
was tough, though. That was what they call a deep cut, right?
And I did do a little tease. I did a little Googling. Dave Wilson's going to be along with his chart of the day in just a second. First up, though, let's check in once again on the trading day with Charlie Pellet. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there. We have got 28 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing records right now for both the S&P and NASDAQ. Got to stay with Bloomberg to see where we close 28 minutes from now, and of course, how Asian markets react tonight. Let's get right to the numbers. I'll give you the why in a moment here. S&P up 40, up 1.1%. The Dow up 198, up now by 0.7%. NASDAQ up 141, higher by 1.2%. 10-year yield 0.91%. Gold up 2.1%, 18.14 the ounce, and a retreat for crude down 1.7%. West Texas Intermediate down 75 cents a barrel, 44.59 on WTI. We're off session highs, stocks trimming gains after starting December on a bullish note in the wake of last month's rally. Dollar extending its slide to a more than 2-year low. Treasury yields jumped. The risk on mood is powering both S&P and NASDAQ to records. S&P, as I mentioned, up now by 1.1%, on track for a record. Gold up 2.1%, 18.14 the ounce. Pfizer and partner BioNTech are seeking regulatory clearance for their COVID-19 vaccine in the European Union, putting the shot on track for potential approval there before the end of the year. Pfizer shares, they're up by 2.6% right now. As for BioNTech, it is down by 8.9%. Should mention Moderna as well. It is down now by 9.9%. Dr. Amish Adalja is senior scholar at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And on Bloomberg Television this morning, he talked about the challenges of getting the entire world vaccinated.
It really has to be all hands on deck when we're vaccinating this level of the population. Initially, it's going to be kind of a trickle, healthcare workers, high-risk individuals, and that might be manageable with existing resources. But when we're talking about vaccinating the entire world's population of adults, it's going to be something you're going to need non-traditional vaccinators. It's not always going to be doctors and nurses. You have to think about pharmacists. You might have to think about first responders, EMTs, paramedics. We need as many people that are able to vaccinate to be able to vaccinate.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. United Health Group expects the pandemic to carve $2 billion out of its profits next year, with COVID-19 testing and treatment costs remaining steady, even as more Americans return to their doctors' offices for routine care. Shares of United Health, they're up right now by 1.4%. Recapping, looking at records for both the S&P and NASDAQ. S&P up 39, up 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio. All right, we're just lost. Oh, man, I don't even know.
You know, Tim, you were saying yesterday was a deep cut. No, not
This
really.
is a deep cut?
See, I thought
This
you...
is a deep cut.
I thought you were going to give Tim a gift today and like.
I was
play
expecting
some...
little Bruce.
Exactly.
You know,
Dave
but that's
Wilson.
okay.
What's up with that?
There's always going to be.
We'll
There's
get
going to
Bruce
be. Yeah.
eventually. But
I
you
know.
got to mix it up. I mean,
I can't even Google. My computer's like, I don't know what that is. I have no
twisting
idea.
by the pool.
Twisting by the pool. Now we're like we're both Googling. What is
Fortunately, I have the internet.
it? Yeah, I know, right? Is our internet guy down?
Is this the Dire Straits?
Yes.
Oh.
So you know.
You
how to
Googled.
I Googled,
You
yeah, I
totally
Googled.
Googled.
Congratulations.
Nice
I Googled.
job. I would have never guessed.
You know, the chart headline says time for a dip. So I thought, where do you
cute.
take a dip? You do it in the pool.
I see what you did
That's
there.
Dire Straits. In any case,
Well
what
done.
kind of a dip are we talking about here? A dip for the Russell 2000 index. And we know that last month The Russell had its biggest gain ever, of course, ever going back to the late 1970s when the index was first.
It was
compiled.
remarkable, yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, what now? You know, if you kind of missed it, and it's something that Tony Dwyer addressed in a note yesterday. He's the chief market strategist at Canaccord Genuity. And what he did is look at, you know, the biggest gains in the Russell over time. Looked at 9 of them. So you figure that last month was first in the top 10. He looked at the rest of the top 10. And what struck me about the numbers he put together is that if you look at the last 5 instances, going back to 2000, you saw that in each case, you know, the Russell was below its end-of-month reading within the next 45 days. And, you know, the average decline was more than 8%. So in other words, you didn't get, you know, much of a continuation of the gains. And at some point in short order, you saw the shares of smaller companies pull back and fall below, as measured by the Russell, where they were at the end of the big, you know, month with the 10% plus gain. So, you know, it's an interesting kind of potential prelude to what may happen in the next few weeks.
Well, it makes sense, though, right? You know, Dave, we often see that with an index or in a particular equity name, like it runs up a lot, and then there's a little consolidation or indigestion or digestion, I should say.
Right, or in this case, as Dwyer put it, relative indigestion.
Right.
Which is what investors may well be left with. In any case, if you want to know more, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.
Tim's going to be serious. I can just go ahead. Go ahead. What do you
I
got?
just want to know what this tells us about stocks that are not in the Russell 2000. Does this send any sort of signal about the S&P 500 or about big tech names?
Well, I mean, you'd have to kind of go back and look at the data. I mean, but what makes, you know, the Russell particularly interesting is that, you know, last month we really saw it take off, and it had been dormant for some time. You know, you had this whole kind of shift, you know, toward smaller companies, toward cheaper shares, value stocks, toward, you know, non-U.S. shares. And so the real question is, you know, given the magnitude of the moves, what happens next?
I'm moving further. My stop on profit for Swissy to 0.9007.
Year, S&P was down about 6%. Small caps were down about 12%. So I don't know what the correlation is, Dave, specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to, did you miss it? I mean, is that it? Or do we just kind of go up in a straight line from here? And, you know, what the history shows us is the short answer is, no, we don't go up in a straight line. There's a potential for another move down.
All right, good stuff. I was going to say, do you ever like read lyrics and like they just feel so different versus singing them?
That's what happened with this song.
That's where I was going to go. All right, but anyway, let's get back to World and National News and back to Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President-elect Joe Biden is rolling out his economic team that will be responsible for his administration's response to the economic fallout from the pandemic. He says there's no need to wait. He says there's still time for the current Congress to act.
Right now, the full Congress should come together and pass a robust package for relief to address these urgent needs. But any package passed in a lame duck session is likely to be at best just a start.
Biden's remarks come as a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the House and Senate unveiled a $908 billion stimulus proposal. Speaker Nancy Pelosi offered her own revised plan, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell started circulating his own proposal. Well, the fallout from the pandemic may have begun in March, but the coronavirus may have been in the country as early as December of last year.
A newly published study identified 106 COVID-19 infections in nearly 7,400 blood samples collected across the country between last December 13th and January 17th of this year. The first reports of mysterious pneumonia coming out of Wuhan, China, emerged in late December of 2019. This study adds to evidence that COVID-19 was silently spreading around the world even before that. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
President Trump still claims the election was stolen, but Attorney General Bill Barr today said the Justice Department has not found any evidence of widespread voter fraud that would change the outcome. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic, Bloomberg Quick Take. And what's interesting, I don't know whether, when you're doing your show in the morning, when you're doing it at noon, how much you guys have been talking about IPOs, but it has been a very busy IPO year, and December is going to be a busy month.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of the stats that have been compiled by Bloomberg. So Airbnb is looking to raise $2.6 billion. That's a lot of money, right?
It's a lot of money.
But guess what? It's going to be the fourth biggest in the U.S. just this year. That's according to data compiled by Bloomberg.
Which is pretty remarkable.
That really puts things into perspective for how much of a gangbuster year it has been for IPOs. Of $2.6 billion is the fourth largest.
It's remarkable considering the volatility that we've seen in this year. We're going to actually talk with somebody who IPO'd a little bit later on our broadcast. But, it feels like, some companies, all of a sudden, their business looked more promising kind of under the pandemic and found a way to get back into the market.
Yeah, the story of
or
Airbnb
to enter
has
the
been
market.
Absolutely remarkable because it pretty much, do you remember back in March and April when we were reading all those stories about Airbnb hosts, people who had bought these homes, who were worried about what was going to happen because everybody had stopped traveling. Then fast forward a couple of months, and it was impossible to find Airbnbs in certain locations because everybody wanted to go to them.
Which is so interesting, right? We had the CEO of Trivago on recently, and it's what you've seen in terms of trends, right, Tim, is that people don't want to go to the they can't go to the big hotels, right? And it's not safe or they don't want to, but they're like, a home with some space, sign me up. Yeah. It's pretty remarkable. So Airbnb is going to come into this market. What I think, $35 billion valuation is pretty impressive, out of the gate. That's what's expected. I think they're going to IPO on, I think they're saying December 9th.
Yeah, and it's one of those stories, we heard a lot about fundraising at down rounds and going for companies going public for less than they had raised in the private markets. Airbnb's highest valuation as a private company was $31 billion. That was back in 2017.
Yeah.
But they took some money from Silver Lake and Sixth Street Partners, where the valuation was $18 billion very recently. So that if they're going for a $35 billion valuation, that is a massive increase in just a few months.
We'll see if investors have the appetite. Just a little perspective, Marriott has got a market cap of $41.7 billion. So this is just a little bit below it. Yeah, context. Right? All right, you're listening to Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business
From
Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks have trimmed gains, but both the S&P and NASDAQ are at records as traders continue to bet vaccine news will lead to an economic surge next year. The S&P up now by 38 points, up 1.1%, bringing its year-to-date gain to 13.3%. The Dow powering higher by 175 points, still below 30,000, up by 0.6%. NASDAQ looking at a record right now, up 144 points, higher by 1.2%. 10-year down 30 seconds, with the yield at 0.92%. Communication services, financial, and information technology are among the biggest S&P industry sector gainers. We've got gold up 2.1%, $18.14 the ounce, higher by $37 the ounce, and a pullback for West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.7%, $44.56 a barrel. So again, records right now for both the S&P and NASDAQ. Should point out that Bitcoin did reach an intraday record before pulling back. Bitcoin down now by 2.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. Just about 11 minutes left to go in the Tuesday trade. It is time for the Drive to the Close. Nice to welcome Sarah Malik. She is head of global equities, chief investment officer of global equities over at Nuveen. They've got roughly $1.1 trillion in assets under management, and she's joining us on the phone from San Francisco. Sarah, nice to have you here with Tim and myself. Let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the markets, because it does feel like there's some enthusiasm, some risk on, once again, back in the trade. What do you make of it?
We think that the market basically is setting up for a return to normal. We have a nice setup for 2021 once we're past some of these near-term bumps in the road. The election's behind us. We likely have a divided government, which is market-friendly. We have a vaccine coming, potential stimulus, low interest rates, low inflation. All of that's very good. We do think 2021 will be a focus on earnings growth. So 2020 was about valuations expanding and driving the market. 2021 is going to be about earnings growth driving the markets. Now, in the meantime, we do have concerns. Obviously, we have a huge spike in the virus, and we're seeing some economic shutdown. So the next few months are going to be bumpy, but we're setting up for a nice period past that time.
Sarah, we'll talk about that in just a second, but I'm seeing in your bio right now that you went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo.
I did.
That's where I'm from. So it's great to talk to a fellow former resident of San Luis Obispo. It's a fantastic place. Yeah, go Mustangs, exactly. I grew up going to those soccer and basketball games when I was a kid. It was so much fun.
So nice.
What do these next 2 months look like, these bumpy 2 months? If we have potentially the president is not going to concede. We have no idea if he will go to the inauguration. Do markets care about that?
I think that's more noise because the markets do realize that we will get through that. The main concerns for us over the next couple of months are really how bad is the economic slowdown, because that resets the bar that we recover from. So how low does that bar go before we finally have that reopening? And that, of course, depends on how this virus continues to go. Now, there could be some upside if we got stimulus during the lame duck session, but our view right now is that you likely don't get that until the first quarter. So definitely a rocky couple of months, and the market will stay volatile around that kind of information coming out.
Well, oh, go ahead. Did you want to say something? No. Oh, San Francisco, how does it feel right now with the virus?
Definitely quiet. It's definitely California is having a lot of issues. San Francisco is slowing down. We moved back to the purple tier. Things are closing again. So, it's starting to feel a lot more like March and April. around here.
So, as an investor, yeah, I mean, I do feel like we understand a vaccine is coming, right? We can, at this point, get a little bit of a timeline and understand maybe we're back to normal by late spring, maybe by summer. Having said that, how do you play the market at this point? We constantly talk about rotation, but again, tech was interesting again this, on this Tuesday. So I'm wondering how you see it, especially from a global perspective.
I mean, November was an interesting month because the market's up about double digits for the month. So really, we expect the market most likely to take a breather as we go through this volatility. And we're less about the rotation at this point. Cyclicals have had such a nice rally. We know growth stocks were very crowded. They gave back a bit. We're more focused on more of a mild risk-on environment in 2021 and focusing on earnings. So it's not, we think it'll be less about is it growth, is it cyclicals, which one do you want to own? It's about owning those companies in any of those areas that can have strong earnings growth. So areas like healthcare where the election's behind you, as the yield curve starts to gradually steepen, are there financials that we like? And in growth and technology sectors, which ones look more attractive? Like Google looks more attractive maybe than Amazon because Google has not had the run that Amazon had this year. So being more selective within the sectors rather than making that larger macro trade of do I want to be in growth or do I want to be in value?
Carol and I were talking about Airbnb just a few minutes ago and just the massive number of IPOs that we've seen this year and the way that December is shaping up to just be the end of a huge year for IPOs. Why are so many companies right now saying this is the right time to raise money?
I mean, I think, the markets have been strong. Companies like Airbnb obviously had their own secular tailwinds. Those could accelerate as more people feel comfortable staying in houses going forward as they travel, and the way that we travel changes over time. I think access to capital with low interest rates has just been interesting in general in terms of M&A and debt that companies are taking on. So I just think there's a lot of capital coming into companies. All that's very positive, especially with the market returns that we've seen year to date.
So I don't know how much you guys talk about this, Sarah, but the disconnect between Main Street and Wall Street. And, Tim and I were talking about it off air, that it really does feel like the small business community, the mid-sized business community has been left behind. And I know a lot of that isn't publicly held, but we talk about it being the backbone of the economy. How many discussions do you guys have at Nuveen where you're seeing this disconnect between people who feel okay if they're in the markets or other asset classes versus those who are not, but are really important to certainly our society and our economy overall, and what that means potentially going forward?
I would say that's a bigger discussion almost on Main Street. So I hear more about that from individuals who are investors and clients who are concerned. Internally, our view has been that this recession was event-driven, and if you look at history, they tend to be deep and short-lived and have these pretty fast rebounds, which is what we saw. And because it's based around one event, which was COVID-19, once we start to see a path out of that, the market tends to rebound quite quickly. I think in the small business space, we're actually big fans of small caps as public companies because they were pretty recently at about 2-decade lows in terms of valuation.
I'm going to put further my stop on profit for Switzy to 0.90002. Okay. I put further my stop on profit
see people buying on the dips as they're trying to get back into equity.
Sarah, I'm eager to get your take on Biden's economic team and what the market is saying about it. We saw today that he's officially nominated Neera Tanden for OMB, Wally Ademo for Deputy Treasury Secretary, and of course for Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. What do investors think?
And just got about 40 seconds.
Yeah, the investors basically have been pretty positive so far on it, that Janet Yellen is fairly market-friendly, regulatory-friendly, and so I think people like this economic team. It's more moderate, it's in the middle, and that should, again, be a positive and less noisy for the market.
All right, good stuff. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Sarah Malik, head of global equities over at Nuveen, $1.1 trillion in assets under management, on the phone from San Francisco. Yeah, big day.
Go Mustangs.
Go Mustangs. God, it would be nice to be in California, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, it would be.
Do you go back there much?
I used to. I mean, this will be the first Christmas that we don't go back in a long time.
Yeah, well, you'll get back there.
Yeah, we will.
Hopefully in the summer. All right, everybody, we're going to count you down to the closing bell. Just about 3.5 minutes to go. Carol Massar, Tim Stanovic, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Records on Wall Street. Folks from Salesforce.com, Giving Tuesday on the 92nd Street Y, virtually ringing the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we await the latest numbers out of Salesforce, HPE, and NetApp, among others. Records again, this update brought to you by PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. Join the pursuit of outperformance at PGIM. Learn more at PGIM.com. That's PGIM.com. Stocks higher as traders continue to bet vaccine news will lead to an economic surge next year. Also, signs that appetite is picking up for a federal spending package, with a bipartisan group of lawmakers arguing for relief. S&P up 40 points. That was a gain of 1.1%. The Dow up 184, up 0.6%. Another record for NASDAQ, surging 156 points, up by 1.3%. 10-year down 24.30 seconds. 10-year yield 0.91%. Gold up 2.1%. 18.14 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.7%. 44.56 a barrel. So we begin the first trading day of the new month with stocks jumping to records. But what about the outlook for the new year, for 2021? Sarah Malik is head of global equities at Nuveen. She was our guest moments ago right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
We do think 2021 will be a focus on earnings growth. So 2020 was about valuations expanding and driving the market. 2021 is going to be about earnings growth driving the markets. Now, in the meantime, we do have concerns. Obviously, we have a huge spike in the virus, and we're seeing some economic shutdown. So the next few months are going to be bumpy, but we're setting up for a nice period past that time.
BlackBerry surged after the wireless company signed a multi-year agreement with Amazon Web Services to develop and market its intelligent vehicle data platform called Ivy. Shares today of BlackBerry up by 19.25%. So again, recapping, records today: S&P up 1.1%, NASDAQ up 1.3%, the Dow up 0.6%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Nobody move a muscle. Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and shakers.
Damn, Stippy, you got some moves.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, time to take a little bit of a deeper dive into today's trade. I'm Carol Masser in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Sarah Ponzak on the phone in New York City. And let me do a little bit of a drill down into the trade. S&P 500, more of a risk-on trade. 384 names in the S&P 500, higher today, 119 lower, 2 unchanged. And if I take a look at the major industry groups in the S&P 500, top of the pack, we heard Dave talking about it at the top of the broadcast. Communication services up nearly 2%. Financials right behind it, up about 1.6%. Only one of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P that was down today were the industrials, down about 0.2%. All right, Sarah, so all of a sudden big tech was okay again.
Right. It was an interesting mix of a trade today. In the early morning, we had seen this cyclical value rotation taking hold, but through the day, that kind of got shaken up a little bit. As you mentioned, financials was at the top of the pack, but right along with plenty of tech stocks. For example, if I look at the NASDAQ, which yes, is tech heavy, but if I look at the best performing stocks on a points basis, it's Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Tesla too, your classic names that we have seen rising before, but you still saw financials up at the top. And some for this may point to the fact that we actually saw yields rise today, which is something that we have not seen lately. Rather, as we talked about this reflation trade, this value trade, this rotation trade, almost the entire time, yes, we saw some head fakes in which we saw 10-year yields move up towards 1%, but we really saw them steady for the most part around that 85 basis point range. Well, today we saw them shoot higher, 92 basis points to close out the day. Of course, that does help banks, financials in that respect, but really there has been a lot of attention put on the bond market and its lack of movement of late. So to see a change today was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting and fascinating to see what we saw in the Treasury market as well. I mean, we actually had we had a NASDAQ record, right? It was a new high.
We did have a NASDAQ record.
Yeah.
So something we hadn't seen. We had seen the S&P hit new highs, Dow, tech stocks had supposedly been lagging behind, which they had been, but still rising, albeit at a slower clip. But something that is interesting today, and we spoke about this back in September or August and early September, was that today, if you look at the VIX equivalent for the NASDAQ 100, VXN, even though we saw the NASDAQ rise today up about 1.5%, we saw the VXN rise too. So we're back in this dynamic today where we've seen stocks rise, but at the same time, measures of implied volatility are rising too. Now, in the past, that has signaled caution, but at the same time, some investors do just point out the fact that you can have volatility on both sides of the equation, on the upside and the downside.
Right.
And these volatility measures are very much tied to the options market, which is all of a sudden very reactive once again.
Right. We're way down from where we were when we were above 40 back in October, when things felt like, a little uncomfortable again. What's interesting is you take a look at the NASDAQ. I mean, it's up, I forget, 38% this year. I mean, it has had such a tremendous run.
It really has. And that brings us back to that stay-at-home, work from home trade, which had come under fire recently. But it has picked up steam again today, though. In that aspect, interesting though, we did see the work from home trade really fade. And when I say fade, I'm talking about some names like DocuSign down 5%, Costco, also your big box retailers, down 1%, but Zoom down 15% today. This, of course, after reporting earnings yesterday after the bell. But this really comes back to this story about the stock market looking forward, looking ahead. Because if we think about the current quarter that we just finished, Zoom actually gave a revenue forecast that came in above analyst estimates. However, its guidance going forward was a slight decline from year-over-year growth from the previous 2 quarters. So this just shows that investors say, you beat on this quarter, that doesn't really matter. What are we going to see in the months ahead?
Sarah, hang on, because we've got a red sticky crossing the Bloomberg. Salesforce to acquire Slack for an enterprise value of $27.7 billion. This shouldn't come as a surprise. We talked about it last week, certainly on air, about once there was some speculation and reporting that could happen. But they're reporting earnings, Salesforce, after the close. We were expecting that we could get some news on a deal. So indeed, Salesforce will acquire Slack, again, an enterprise value of $27.7 billion. So quick check. Of course, Salesforce, we're going to talk about it a little bit more. They did also come out with earnings. Stocks down about 1% in the after hours. But interesting, we've seen a fair amount of deal flow. Let me just take a look at Slack here in the after hours. It's down a little bit lower as well. All right, Sarah, thank you so much. Really appreciate your input. Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Sarah Ponczak breaking down the markets for us on this Tuesday. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up. Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave! Who? Dave!
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
All right, Mr. Wilson, what do you got? Stock of the day is Arlo.
Arlo Technologies, Carol. It's a maker of security cameras and video doorbells. The company was a unit of networking product maker Netgear before being spun off 2 years ago. Now, in preparation for the spinoff, Arlo was taken public in August 2018. The ticker is its first name, ARLO. While the shares climbed in the first month of trading, the gains were short-lived. In March of this year, Arlo fell to a record low of $1.20 a share, down 93% from the initial price. Now, today was another story because of Apple, which listed a security camera system from Arlo in its online store. The system consists of 2 cameras and a base unit and costs about $550. Now, Apple has sold the company's products before, according to Raymond James, yet speculation about the new listing sent Arlo shares to their biggest gain since the very first day of trading. They rose more than 31%.
Gosh, that is quite a bump up. All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, his stock of the day ticker is Arlo. I did mention the big corporate story right now. It's an M&A story. Salesforce acquiring Slack for an enterprise value of $27.7 billion. Slack will be a separate operating company for Salesforce, and I do believe that Slack's CEO will continue to be CEO of that company. So again, this was a story that we talked about, expectation, speculation, just about a week ago, but getting some confirmation of it. We're going to break it down in just a moment right here on Bloomberg Radio. We do want to do, though, a quick check on world and national news. With that, let's toss things over to Ed Baxter in San Francisco. Hey, Ed.
Hey, Carol. Attorney General William Barr. Well, look here. Close ally of Donald Trump. A man who's been criticized with allegations that he has run the Justice Department like Mr. Trump's law firm is now telling Associated Press that the Justice Department has not uncovered evidence of widespread voter fraud that would change the outcome of the election. So shortly after Mr. Barr's statement was published, Mr. Trump tweeted out more baseless claims for voter fraud, and Rudy Giuliani stated, with all due respect to the Attorney General, there hasn't been any semblance of an investigation. Now, President-elect Biden ignoring all the hubbub and introducing his economic team.
It includes groundbreaking Americans who come from different backgrounds, but who share my core vision for economic relief here in the United States of America.
And, of course, led by Janet Yellen at Treasury. Politics, a potential relief bill will Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
The one thing we all agree on is that we don't have time for messaging games. We don't have time for lengthy negotiations.
Yeah, Senator Mark Warner saying it cannot be ignored now.
Would be stupidity on steroids if Congress left for Christmas without doing an interim package as a bridge.
Now, McConnell did allude to the fact that much depends on what Mr. Trump would sign before January 20th. Joe Biden has said he'd be willing to look at anything, but they want it done sooner. Advisory panel meeting today on how and whom to receive the first vaccines. Dr. Thomas Frieden, former CDC director and member of the advisory board himself.
You want to make sure that doctors get it, because and nurses and all healthcare workers, not just the people who you may see stories about, but people cleaning the floors, the people...
Yeah, the people as the elderly. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter.
All right, Ed, thank you so much for that update. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser, joining me right now is our own Charlie Pellet. And Tesla was up another 3% in today's session, Charlie. So it's now up 598, almost 599% so far in 2020. And listen, it's going to rally because we're going to do an all-in into the S&P index rather than, I think initially people thought when Tesla is added to the index, it would be a couple of tranches. Instead, it's going to be an all-in deal.
Indeed. And I'm glad that you started with the YTD numbers there on the Bloomberg in terms of Tesla. It's worth a repeat. Right? 598%. Yes, definitely amazing here. Now, why is all of this important? Let's back up a little bit. And this is because with about $11 trillion in funds that are tied to the S&P 500 index, money managers have been looking toward a few busy weeks ahead, no matter how Tesla was included in the index. But the bottom line is money managers whose fortunes are tied to the S&P 500 index now have to go ahead and buy this stock.
Right. And I think people were worried about if it was two tranches, you know, how that might kind of complicate things or, you know, kind of confuse markets or, you know, just, and I guess I think the thinking is now, like, pull the Band-Aid off, just do it. Let's do it. But, you know, think about it, that index fund managers, they're going to be buying Tesla shares. They're going to have to be offloading other shares, right? It's a market-weighted index. So that's why everybody's been trying to be like, how are you going to do this? How are we going to kind of roll Tesla, which is huge, $554 billion market cap into those index funds.
Indeed. I love the quote today from Steve Sosnick, who is chief strategist at Interactive Brokers, saying, quote, looks like they are ripping the Band-Aid off, and saying that ultimately it will be less disruptive. Hey, one other very brief quick note involving Tesla today, and that is CEO Elon Musk warning in an internal email to employees that the shares could get crushed if investors start to worry about the electric car maker's ability to deliver on profit expectations. He's telling employees to pinch pennies.
I love that. You know, a CEO like no other. All right, Charlie Pellet. Elon Musk definitely makes it interesting.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We begin with Salesforce.com. Based in San Francisco, shares lower now by 3% after hours. Salesforce forecast adjusted EPS for the fourth quarter, and that guidance missed the average analyst estimate. Again, shares down by 2.8% as I speak. Salesforce also making it official. It is buying Slack Technologies for $27.7 billion in cash and stock, giving the corporate software giant a popular workplace communications platform in one of the biggest tech deals of the year. Again, we do have shares of Salesforce down 2.7%. Stocks started the new trading month by rising to records, at least for the S&P and NASDAQ, as a renewal of aid talks added to optimism over progress on coronavirus vaccines. The dollar extended its slide to a more than two-year low. Treasury yields jumped. Let's begin there with the 10-year yield now 0.92%. 10-year down 26 seconds. S&P up 40, a gain of 1.1%. The Dow up 185 points, up 0.6%. NASDAQ up 156, up 1.3%. Gold up 2.1% today, surging $37.52 the ounce to $18.14, and a retreat for crude. West Texas Intermediate down 1.7% at $44.55 a barrel. Again, recapping, Salesforce is buying Slack. Salesforce shares down 3.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. And we want to stick with that story. Salesforce, yeah, they're out with earnings, but yeah, they're making a deal. And we talked about it about a week ago. Let's get back to Anurag Rana, who we talked about it with. He's senior analyst of software and IT services here at Bloomberg. He's on the phone from Chicago. So not a surprise, right?
Yeah, not a surprise when you have a good idea of what's going to happen. So we were expecting that just because they're going to have an earnings call at 5 o'clock. So I all of us were expecting this, I guess.
Well, what? Because it makes sense, or because it just when Salesforce, when it gets out there, if they're going to do it. I mean, this is a company that you and I talked about before. They are acquisitive. They do a lot of deals, but this one makes sense.
No, this one makes. I mean, I have to be very honest with. Almost all of the stuff that they've bought over the last 15 years or so, they have figured out a way to really make it work.
Yeah.
And one of the ways you have to think about is these guys have a massive distribution channel where they can, if you're already selling software into the CIO, you might as well bring another product there next time you come in. And frankly, from Slack's point of view, they have a very good product. In fact, some people will argue they have the best product in the market, but they didn't have the breadth to go out and sell that product to, different companies and different enterprises. And that's where they were losing some share to Microsoft, because Microsoft's been around these enterprises for, 30 odd years. And it's difficult for a new company to go out and break that. So I think Salesforce gives them the ability to sell that product now. And I think it's going to get tougher for Microsoft, when with the Salesforce might behind them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when, Salesforce, as you said, they have figured out how to buy a company, integrate it in. My understanding is, I think Slack's CEO, though, is still going to stay in place. Do you think that's important in your view?
That is very important. He is, he's somebody who really is visionary in terms of creating a new product line. That was not the case before. But, think about it. When you are a startup, you have a handful of few hundred people as your sales, in your sales area. But, you marry with somebody like a Salesforce, which will have thousands of people going out and selling your product. Just by the nature of that, your organic growth rate is going to spike up over the next few quarters. And I think that's one of the reasons why Salesforce is so good at executing these deals, because it has the ability to scale it up.
Right, kind of a bolt-on, right? Like they've already got the relationships, right? They've already got the network and the infrastructure, so you just throw on another product to some extent. How many kinds of what Slack does, right? And it's, used by teams, to work on projects together. I mean, how many similar types of software programming are there out there, Anurag?
So Slack was the first mover in this particular market. They really started this chat collaboration area a few years ago. It's taking off, quite well. Mm-hmm. And then Microsoft, as part of their, productivity applications, also created a new product called Microsoft Teams, and that has done very well over the last 2 years. So in reality, these are the two, I would say the big behemoths in the area. But now I think it's not going to be easy for Microsoft to just, conquer every enterprise out there, because now you have Salesforce selling Slack into the same channel.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Hey, let's not forget earnings. Anything we need to know about Salesforce earnings? I know we're focusing on the deal, and obviously that's a big deal, but what do we need to know about the earnings report?
Nothing too shocking. I mean, a couple of things, most of the things are good. Maybe one area that's a little bit light, but, that typically happens. And in fact, we are, I would say, coming into that end point of all the, less spending in certain areas of lower IT spending. We think from next year, we should see a spike up in IT spending, which should help all software vendors, not just Salesforce.
The CFO is retiring. Mark Hawkins, was that expected? Is that a surprise? Is there anything nuanced to that?
I wouldn't think too much of it. This is one of the best finance teams in the I would say the software space, or in fact all of tech space. They have a very deep bench. I'm not concerned at all about it.
Yeah, really fascinating. Stock is, I think, a little bit down, though, in the after hours. Is that just because it's down about 4.2%? Is that just because it's a deal and they're acquiring a company?
I think that's probably it at this point. I mean, we'll listen to the call if they have anything to say about synergies or any kind of cutbacks, et cetera, that we see. But I don't expect any major shakeup on that.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Hey, Anurag, thank you so much. Anurag Rana, he's Senior Software and IT Services Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, on the phone from Chicago. Again, our big corporate story at this hour, another M&A deal. We've seen a fairly busy deal year. We're talking about IPOs being busy, but we've also seen some pretty big deals. So Salesforce agreeing to buy software maker Slack for $27.7 billion. It is a cash and stock deal. And it really does give software to Salesforce that is a popular workplace communications platform, as we just heard from Anurag, in one of this is going to really be one of the biggest technology deals of the year. So it's pretty interesting, and it is the largest ever acquisition by Salesforce, which is a company that is known for being acquisitive. That is really part of its strategy, and then integrating it in. So it's expected to close that deal in the fiscal second quarter of 2022. Now, for those of you listening in New York and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to continue. If you are listening, though, on Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, D.C., Sound On with Kevin Cirilli is coming up next. Coming up next, though, on Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to get, let me just do a quick check, because it was the most read story. It still is, all day long on the Bloomberg terminal. We'll get to that in just a moment. Stick around.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yeah, this is Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Masser in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Listen, this is our most read story on the Bloomberg. It has been since I got up at, 5:30 this morning, 4:30 this morning, and it still is all day long. So stick around. We'll tell you exactly what it's about in just a moment. Let's get a check, though, on your top business stories. A lot of news there. Big deal after the closing bell, Charlie.
Indeed, and let us begin right there. And just a reminder, this update brought to you by PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential, committed to better outcomes for ESG investments. Join the pursuit of outperformance at PGIM. Learn more at pgim.com. Salesforce boosting its revenue forecast for the year. That guidance beating the average analyst estimate. EPS forecast missed estimate. Shares now down by almost 4%. Salesforce and Slack, that's the big story. That deal is going down. Salesforce buying Slack Technologies for $27.7 billion in cash and stock, giving the corporate software giant a popular workplace communications platform in one of the biggest tech deals of the year. Anurag Rana is senior analyst for software and IT services of Bloomberg Intelligence. He was our guest moments ago right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
They have a very good product. In fact, some people will argue they have the best product in the market, but they didn't have the breadth to go out and sell that product to different companies and different enterprises, and that's where they were losing some share to Microsoft, because Microsoft's been around these enterprises for 30 odd years, and it's difficult for a new company to go out and break that.
Texas billionaire Tillman Fertitta is weighing taking a substantial part of his casino and restaurant empire public. This, according to sources. It was an up day on Wall Street, a record-setting day today for both the Dow Jones Industrial Average, for the NASDAQ Composite Index, and the S&P. The Dow closed, but still under 30,000. S&P up 40 at a record 3662. That was a gain of 1.1%. NASDAQ also at a record up 156, up 1.3%. The Dow up 185 points, up 0.6%, to be clear. No record on the Dow, but records for both the S&P and NASDAQ. 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold up 2.1%, surging $37 the ounce to $18.14, and a retreat for West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.3%, $44.32 a barrel. Pfizer and partner BioNTech are seeking regulatory clearance for their COVID-19 vaccine in the European Union, putting the shot on track for potential approval there before the end of the year. Pfizer shares up today by 2.9%, but BioNTech shares, they dropped by 8.2%. Again, recapping, S&P 500 index up 41 points, higher today by just about 1.1%. After the bell, Salesforce and Slack Salesforce agrees to buy Slack Technologies. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So, all right, everybody, this story is the most read story on the Bloomberg today. And it has to be about, we know COVID has impacted so much of our world, right? It's accelerated some positive as well as negative trends. But in the financial world, it means things may never go back to the way they were pre-virus. So let's find out more about this story. It's in the current issue of Bloomberg Markets. Joining us is Linan Nguyen. She is finance reporter at Bloomberg News. She's on the phone in New York City. Linan, great story. Everybody's reading it. So what's going on here?
Thanks, Carol. Well, a little question for you. When was the last time you went to an ATM and got cash out?
Probably actually a few weeks ago.
A few weeks ago.
But for the most part, I haven't done it a lot.
And same for me. Throughout this pandemic, I've probably been to an ATM maybe twice, and I still have, the same amount of money. Haven't needed to use cash, and that's the first quote from this story. Really, is from a founder of a mobile bank, and she says basically this pandemic has really accelerated a permanent shift to a cashless society. We were already on that track, but this has really jump-started that move. So there are a lot of people, who are using mobile banking, who are using, cashless payments, using their cell phones to pay for things now, and that is it sounds like that's going to be permanent. That's
Listen,
tricky.
it makes sense. I finally got onto Apple Pay. Like, I'm doing everything. I don't want to actually touch money, to be quite honest, right now. And I think this is going to be something that really gets us over the hump. So what does it mean for the finance industry?
What it means is that the finance industry is going to have to retool a lot of its digital offerings to become sort of the way of life now. So that means that people are doing a lot more on their phones, on their computers, and the industry really has to get up to speed on that. I think a lot of the big banks have already done that, but I think it's just accelerating that shift across the whole industry to maybe firms that were a little smaller, banks that are smaller, or, you know, the local providers as well. Everyone has to be online now, and everyone has to be able to do the majority of their banking through their phone or their computer.
Well, listen, they knew it was coming, right? I mean, they had to know, but it's like it took something like this, I think, for people who weren't comfortable with it. I mean, once you do stuff online, especially when it comes to banking, whether it's moving money around or what have you, you're like, why wasn't I doing this before? It's just so much easier.
Yes, exactly. And necessity is the mother of invention, right? Whereas some people may have been going in to deposit a physical check, they looked at not wanting to get sick and decided, okay, let's try this thing on my phone. And for the most part, when people deposit a check on their phones, they don't go back, right? So
right.
It's necessity is the mother of invention, and also this cultural shift that kind of gets you over that inertia, causes people to do things differently, and then they see how much more convenient it is to do banking on their phones or on their computers.
Lynanne, is there any consensus about working from home? Like, I just remember kind of the early days, and people were like, no, everybody's going to come back to banks. And I think even was it J.P. Morgan, like, yeah, no, whatever, we're going to get everybody back. And then it was kind of backtracking a little bit. Is there a consensus about what's going to happen?
So there's still a widespread of views. So there isn't one playbook, but I think there is a shift. There is definitely a shift towards more remote working, whether that's, it depends on the firm and what type of work you do, but even, the head of BNP Paribas USA said to us that they're looking at reducing their real estate footprint. That is true across many financial firms. And even if they do retain the real estate, they might shift those offices to work in a different way. For instance, more meeting rooms or more big meeting rooms for people to come in occasionally, rather than a bunch of desks or a permanent desk for each staff member. It's a kind of hot desk situation. So we are seeing that shift towards more remote working or more flexibility. And that's also a way that employers are trying to kind of incentivize staff or recruit people.
Well, in just got about 25 seconds, recruiting has changed a lot, right? It's going to have to, just quickly.
That's right. Jonathan Kellner from the Members Exchange says this is a way that we win talent. If you can offer people flexibility, you can say, hey, you work from home for some of the time and then come to the office for some of the time. They think maybe they can democratize the industry and get more interesting and talented staff from, all corners of the U.S.
It's wild. What a great story. Really, really wonderful. And I know people can check it out. First of all, as I said, it's the most read story on the Bloomberg today, so they can find it there. They can also find it at Bloomberg.com. And of course, in Bloomberg Markets Magazine. Lynanne, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Lynanne Nguyen, finance reporter at Bloomberg News, joining us on the phone in New York City. All right, let's get another check on world and national news. Over to Ed Baxter in San Francisco. Hello there, Ed.
Hello, Carol again. The Northeast is leading an alarming increase in COVID-19 U.S. hospitalizations, with a myriad of areas not far behind. New York Health Commissioner Dr. David Chokshi going as far as saying that at greatest risk need to pay very, very close attention.
That means stopping non-essential activities, staying in as much as possible, and avoiding social activities outside of your household.
He says for the elderly, that means only medical appointments, grocery shopping, or pharmacy visits. Dr. Anthony Fauci says until vaccine is widely distributed,
we're going to be looking at 30 or more days of a period of time of precarious risk.
He says, which include holiday shopping and the holidays themselves. As for the vaccine, well, CDC advisory board meeting today in deciding who and how should get the first doses.
One is, how much good are you going to do? How many lives are you going to save? Second is, what's fair? What's the fair way to do it? And the third is, how can we do this openly, transparently, so that there's no backroom deals?
Dr. Thomas Frieden, former CDC director and board member there. So relief. Well, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is distributing now a new money plan.
We're going to send that out to all the offices and get some feedback to see how our members react to a proposal that we can say for sure would be signed into law.
He says there's no space for delay. And Trump ally Attorney General William Barr says the DOJ has found no evidence of widespread fraud that would change the election. The president hasn't stopped tweeting unsubstantiated charges, and Rudy Giuliani says the AG hasn't done a real investigation. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
It is indeed. All right, Ed Baxter, thank you so much. Ed Baxter there in San Francisco. So joining me right now, once again, Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News. Charlie, so did you just hear that story that we were doing with Lenan? I know you're busy. So
No. With Lenan talking about changing habits with banks, listen,
when's
I'm
the
married.
last time you went to an ATM?
Well, I'm married and I listen. So, yes, I heard exactly what you were saying, dear.
Can you train my husband? Not gonna happen.
I agree with the general thrust there, probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but stuff seems to come up in the Pellet household. Kid needs money, wife needs money, the dog needs something at Petco. So, I try to do a lot of it. I'm not at the point yet where I'm willing to deposit checks electronically, but
Really?
taking money.
It's like so liberating. You just take a picture, both sides, and it's bam.
All right, well, let me snip it right back at you.
Charlie.
Who uses checks? Who needs to deposit
I
anything?
don't do a lot. No, but occasionally you get like an insurance refund check or, potentially get a tax refund. I mean, you do get checks and you have to, put them in the
once in a while. All right, but listen, can we talk about real estate, office
Sure,
real estate?
wherever you want to go, Charlie.
Yeah, right. Well, let me tell you this. Bloomberg has a story here talking about the availability office rate in Manhattan up to 13.5% in November. More companies looking to sublease their offices.
Did you see this? They haven't had this much available space since 2003. Did you say that?
I didn't say that, but I was hoping you would.
Sorry.
But listen, this is just one. My mind's all over the place, but just one side thought here.
What?
Remember the fantastic show called The Office that went on for years?
Yep. The British version or the American version?
Both.
Okay.
But to my point, if they were to rename that and turn it into a work-from-home sitcom called The Kitchen Table or The Dining Room Table, it would last for one show. That's all you can get out of it. It would be a good show. But the point being, work from home, I don't think it's going to last.
Charlie, Charlie, tell me how you really feel.
People will be returning to offices.
No, I think they will too. Listen, I hear it from my colleagues who are still working from home, but they're like, I can't wait to come back. And they either have certain issues that don't make it possible right now, but they're looking forward to it. All right, Charlie Pellet, always fun right here on Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Lots of After the Bell news. This update brought to you by PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. Committed to better outcomes for ESG investments. Join the pursuit of outperformance at PGIM. Learn more at pgim.com. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise reported quarterly revenue that topped analyst estimates, suggesting that businesses are upgrading their data center hardware during the coronavirus pandemic. Shares of HPE down now by 0.4%. Big deal after the bell. Many people saw this one coming. Salesforce buying Slack Technologies for $27.7 billion in cash and stock, giving the corporate software giant a popular workplace communications platform in one of the biggest technology deals of the year. Salesforce, after earnings, down by 4.2%. Slack shares, they're trading little changed. Stocks started December by rising to records as a renewal of aid talks added to optimism over progress on coronavirus vaccines. S&P up 40, a gain of 1.1%. At a record, the Dow up 185, up 0.6%. NASDAQ also at a record, up 156 points, up 1.3%. 10-year yield surging to 0.92%, down 27.30 seconds. Gold up 2.2%, 18.15 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 2%, 44.42 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. So recently we talked about a pledge by the Rockefeller Foundation of about $1 billion to help address the inequities widened by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's about addressing our big problems, the pandemic, climate change, and energy poverty. Well, I got a chance to catch up once again with the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, Rajiv Shah, at the Bloomberg Live Sustainable Business Summit, where we talked about catalyzing the green recovery. And in this little clip, we highlighted China's role in all of this. Check it out.
Do we need to have China obviously be a part of this and be part of the communication and the actions in order for it to really make a difference?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, look, China is the second most important economy in the world, and soon will be the biggest. And in reality, you know, in a multipolar world, you need real U.S.-Chinese cooperation on big international efforts, and a true global green recovery will require and demand Chinese participation. The good news is, you know, China launched the Belt Road Initiative. That's the closest thing that the world has today to a Marshall Plan. I think Chinese leaders have spoken in detail about their understanding of building a global environment that is connected to and from which they both contribute and benefit. The question is, can you do it better? You know, when we did the Marshall Plan, we did it with a lot of American companies. The Belt Road Initiative is very heavily focused on Chinese finance and Chinese companies and certain Chinese technologies like coal, and sort of evolving beyond that to embrace the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, for example, and all the transactions that are done under the BRI, to embrace real renewable electrification strategies for the bottom 2 to 3 billion people around the world, to embrace genuine partnerships with other industrial nations in expanding the remit of that effort and approaching it in a really cooperative way. You know, it can either be a threat to American leadership around the world, or it can be an opportunity to collaborate and build a global community that is far more inclusive, far more sustainable, and as I've seen firsthand in some very tough places, also more stable, more safe, more secure. And that is the world we need to build, and we need to show some leadership to get there.
All right, so we've done a lot of talking. You've talked about kind of the tools are there, right? We've learned from the financial crisis. What is it that you think people like kind of, these are things we need to work on so that we can build a better future, a greener future, but that's also very beneficial to the world at large?
Well, I'd say the one big thing, no matter what walk of society you're part of and what part of the business community you're part of, is just really understanding how are you providing value towards a sustainable and inclusive economy. Really having a crisp understanding of that and making sure you're investing in the right things in that regard. Part of it, then there are more specific recommendations. Everyone should be thinking about ESG investments, and that should be a significant portion of the portfolio. Anyone managing an endowment should look seriously at divestment and understand whether they can make that happen within the contours of their institution and take on that responsibility. I think anyone who is running a larger or even a smaller operating company of some type should be looking to see, are they able to turn their corporate engine into an engine of service delivery and growth for those who have been excluded from the last decade of economic performance, and frankly, the last 4 decades in the United States, and those that are getting crushed during this COVID crisis, which includes essential workers in America. And there are infinite opportunities, especially for many of our tech champions, to rethink how they are treating their employees, what it means to be a gig worker, how you maintain flexibility, but also provide the essentials that create for dignified work, healthcare, education for children, real notification of the time you're asked to work, and respect for the time you're waiting for a car ride to pop up on your app and you go pick somebody up. As the economy changes, we need corporate leaders and investors to take much more leadership over these issues, and everyone has a role to play if you really think about how you are affecting the nature of the future of our economy.
If we all do this, right, and if we all think about these 3 major problems that you laid out, the pandemic, climate, and also talked about energy poverty, if we do this and get it right, what do you think will be the outcome, and in what time frame?
Well, we're convinced that you can end energy poverty in a decade. And while that might sound like it's one slice, it's one of many problems, we actually know that it is the most correlated issue that keeps people trapped in poverty and that robs people, especially in developing nations, of their capacity to improve their human productivity. So solving that problem in the next decade can literally bring billions of people out of poverty into a modern global economy, enable them to use digital tools and have access to growth, opportunity, and dignity that comes with income and upward mobility. I think that's a major, major win for humanity. I think second, acting now on and recognizing that the stimulus actions we take are once in a lifetime actions, effectively, especially for anyone in public service, because lifetime support in public service, getting this right matters, and we have to learn from the global financial crisis. We cannot have a slow and sluggish set of actions that effectively leave out the bottom 60% of working households in the industrial world. Our politics won't sustain that in the future.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We've got to get this right. Are you optimistic that we will?
I am. I'm an optimist. I've seen us rush to create a vaccine, 3 of them potentially for COVID. I've actually, over the course of 20 years, seen us vaccinate hundreds of millions of kids who would have otherwise missed those vaccinations because of real public-private partnership. We're embarking on this fight against energy poverty with the support of the world's largest energy companies and the world's smallest energy storage innovators. I mean, people have a yearning to make a difference in the world. And somewhere along the way, capitalism and corporate culture kind of puts that yearning in a box. And if we can reconnect people to their sense of purpose and help them recognize that their actions now will define the planet in the future, and give them a chance to look back on what they did in this moment with pride, I'm very optimistic that we'll succeed.
And that was Dr. Rajiv Shah, president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Caught up with him earlier today at the Bloomberg Live Sustainable Business Summit. So really looking at what he sees as a really tremendous opportunity for the world, looking at what the pandemic has done, looking at climate and the impact of climate change, and then also thinking about energy poverty that affects about 800 million people around the world, but thinking all the aid that's being put out there, that why can't we bring out the aid, create jobs, but also do it in a green way. So really a very thoughtful conversation. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
I'm going to keep stop on profit for Swissy overnight because I don't want to hold it if this pair. So if the price will move up, it will get executed at the price 0.90.2. Okay, have a great evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you want to get strategy, you can go, you can check basically our ticker, and you will see the website where you can get the strategy, follow our trades, and make profit as well. Okay? Speak to you tomorrow. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.